I need you to realize and see that you can get help. That it's okay that you feel that way, but it's not okay for you to stay that way. You can get out of it, man. Ma'am, you can get out of it. Hi, everybody. I'm Lee Scott, and thank you for watching and or listening to this week's episode of Leading with Lee. We're on here. We talk about life, leadership, and legacy, and we want to help you discover the leadership within because we believe everybody has a capacity and level of leadership. If you have not done it yet, go right now and subscribe on YouTube and all podcasting platforms because we want to get weekly and generally bi-weekly content, but right now we've been giving weekly content to you on the podcast stream and also on YouTube. It's bi-weekly. So I'm super excited for you to be here today. And I hope that you're going to be inspired by today's subject. Today, I'm going to talk about a particular interesting subject that I've talked about before, but never on the podcast of Leading with Lee. About 3 years ago, I did a teaching called Holistic Leadership at one of my live seminars that I had back in 2019 when I first started Leading with Lee. And I want to revisit this subject because I didn't record it, but I want to share with you today because there are some things that are happening right now in our culture and our society that I think is super important for us to have a conversation about. So over these next two episodes from these alternate weeks, you will hear from me and I'll be talking from the subject, wholeness, health, and leadership. Wholeness, health, and leadership. And let's get started and talking about this subject. So I want to give you my definition of leadership. And you always know that I'm going to give it to you every single time that you're here on Leading with Lee to give you some perspective about what it is that you can do and how everybody has a capacity and level of leadership. So I'm going to give you my definition. My definition is leadership is seeing something that has not happened yet and taking people, organizations, and personal processes in that direction. Again, leadership is seeing something that has not happened yet and taking people, organizations, and personal processes in that direction. Okay, so let's get into this topic today because I think that there's a lot going on around us as it relates to wholeness and health and how we really should have some dialogue, concerning the topic because there's so many factors involved in talking about the subject of health. Now, we live in an environment, especially here in America and especially in Western spaces, where we are a part of this grinding culture. We celebrate people that grind. We celebrate people that work 80 hours a week. We celebrate people that put so much effort into doing things. And we celebrate them because we think that that makes them successful because they're grinding. They're pumping it out. They're staying up late hours. They're doing all these different things. They're breaking their backs because they're going after their dreams. And to some degree, I agree with the sentiment. I believe that you should invest everything you can into your dreams. But I also think that we probably should step back and think about the impact of grinding. And what does that do to you mentally and emotionally, spiritually, and physically? And how is that affecting you in the long term? So today I'm going to talk about two specific areas, and I'm going to take some time to really unpack them the best way I know how. But I'm going to talk about these areas because I think that these areas are so critical when we talk about this subject of leadership and how we need to develop some healthy and productive habits in our space. So the two areas that I'm going to talk about today specifically is spiritually and mentally. In the next episode, I'm going to talk about physical and relational health, but I'm going to deal with spiritual health and mental health today. And I don't think it's by accident that these two things have some correlating things that we can learn from and understand. The first thing that I want to kind of talk about as it relates to spiritual health is that I believe that every leader should have a moral compass. I think that there's a set of values that should guide how you approach life, how you approach issues, how you approach different things in your life. You should be guided by a set of principles. A few years ago, I read this great book by this gentleman named Blake Murkowski. And as you might know, that Blake Murkowski is the founder of Tom's, which is a phenomenal social entrepreneurship company that has done great work around the world with giving access to shoes for children all over the globe. They have a policy that if you buy a pair of Tom's, they will actually give a pair to children. And I read his book a few years ago. His first book, it was called Start Something That Matters. And he talks about how he even got the idea of Tom's from going on a trip to help communities in Argentina, and how that trip actually really impacted him back in 2006. And it's left such an indelible mark upon his mind and his heart as it relates to how can I effectively impact people's lives and do something that's positive to move them forward and actually give them something that they actually need. And this experience actually challenged him, and he came back to the States, and he started talking to investors, and he started to engage individuals about this topic because he felt like this was a way for him not only to self-express, but to make a positive impact on people's lives. And I think what's great about that is he got the motivation, the momentum behind him, and he stepped up to the plate and he said, hey, I'm going to do something that's important, and I'm going to do something that's going to significantly change and transform the lives of the folks that I'm engaging with. And today I want to give you some perspective about that, because one thing that leaders need in our time is morals and having a moral compass. Right now, we have seen throughout our society and culture that there's a gross negligence in some ways in how we approach certain issues. That we even have seen throughout the pandemic, how certain individuals, whether it's right or wrong or what, no matter what your views are, have made billions upon billions of dollars that have gone into their pockets and not gone to their employees and all these different things. And no matter what your view is, it impacts our thought processes about what is the right thing to do as it relates to serving the communities or serving the people that are part of our organization. And you in your leadership, whether you're a CEO of a company, whether you are an entrepreneur, whether you are in your friend group, whether you are engaging people every single day, you have to be led by a set of values, because values determine how you engage or perceive the world. There's a dear friend of mine. He's been on Leading with Lee before. His name is Evan Dugood. And I admire Evan so much because he has this desire and drive to do everything he can for people who are living in homelessness and experiencing homelessness every day. I was recently having a conversation with him, and he was sharing with me how he was making efforts to try to figure out how can we create wraparound services for these people, because it's not just about getting them access to a shower and a hot meal and all those things, but it's actually about trying to help them move from one stage to another stage. And maybe you may not do something as grandiose as Evan, but there are some values that you have that matter so much in your everyday experience. There are values that you have that people need your perspective, because your values actually might bring a new light to things, and it might cause people to see that we can do things better. That's why it's important for you to have some spiritual health. And I don't know what your belief systems are. Obviously, everybody who may watch this or listen to this may have different belief systems, but I think it's important for you to have a moral compass and have a set of values that guide the way you operate in the world. Number two, as it relates to spiritual health, is the morality of your leadership will impact your team. We just talked about how personally it emanates from who you are. It emanates from your personhood, your set of exposure, your set of understanding. It comes from who you are functioning as in the world. But because it starts with you, it's going to affect the people that you lead. It's going to affect your business. It's going to affect your family. It's going to affect every person that you come in contact with, because that nothing that you do is isolated. And it's super important because we see this moral compass conversation happening in different spaces within our society and culture right now as it relates to the issue of CTE, as we have had conversations about the NFL, the National Football League, has in the past decade had more conversations, made more policy moves, made more decisions as it relates to the way players play because of this issue of CTE. And we have seen how there have been lawsuits even against the NFL concerning this issue because people were saying, hey, we are so afraid, or we're seeing our family members die as a result of being injured in playing football. We're having people lose their lives because they had symptoms of CTE later in their lives, or they had so much brain damage over time that it was affecting them. And in maybe the last 5 years or so, the NFL has made efforts to change some of its rules. The NFL have drastically changed how you can even tackle players now. If you hit a player above like their neckline, it is a penalty, and you even get fined by the league, a financial fine, because they're trying to protect players in a dangerous sport, because they recognize that this is something that they are morally obligated to do, because it's bad for business if players are seriously hurt, but it also is going to do good for them in the long run. What does that mean for you? Is that your personal values, what you believe, your moral compass does not just affect you. No decision you make is isolated. Whether you're a parent, whether you're an employee, whether you're the owner of a business, whether you're just a friend, nothing that we do is isolated. And we have to understand that the importance of we have to understand the importance of that when we operate in the world and engage with individuals about certain topics, because needless to say, you are obligated. You have to understand that you will not make decisions in isolation. They will affect somebody. And we see that conversation going on and on and on in the NFL. They're continuously making decisions to try to slow down the momentum and impact of this particular issue, because they know that there is something very serious that has to be done as it relates to this. They want to ensure that they don't get another lawsuit, that they don't experience a lot of the blowback that it might have affected people watching the league and different things like that. And they're doing whatever they need to do in their power to ensure that this issue doesn't always stay an issue. That this issue moves on a little bit. It gets a little bit better for players. It gets a little bit better for players and their families, and they can live a sustainable life post their NFL careers. And then we see this conversation continuously going on in other sports and other veins. I remember a few years ago, I think it may have been 2018 or 2019, I was watching Last Week Tonight with John Oliver, who is a late night host who has a Sunday show. And he was talking about how some of the wrestlers in the World Wrestling Entertainment, which I grew up loving as a kid. I used to love the WWE. It was called the WWF at the time when I was a kid. How many of these athletes have died from symptoms and have dealt with head injuries and lack of access to certain things. And it's caused that business to have to reframe or try to consider some new pathways. It pushed them to try to consider how they're taking care of their folks. And even post their careers, they were seeing individuals having to deal with the repercussions of not having health care, not having access to dental, not having access to certain things. And these things are morally an issue. These are moral things. These are not something that's impossible for that company to make. But these were moral things that the company had to make decisions about, because people were like, bro, these people are giving their whole lives to this industry. They're giving their whole selves, their bodies. They're literally putting their bodies on the line to be a part of this sport. Yet they're not getting the access that they need as it relates to their health. And my question for you is, how are you going to figure out the ways that you can do some righteous things or rightful things or moral things rather that could benefit the folks that you're leading? That can benefit the people that you're in relationships with. That can benefit the people that you're connected to because you are aware of the moral implications. You're aware of the effects that it has on folks. You're aware that you have an obligation to them. And I know. For people going to listen to this and watch this, they're going to say to themselves, well, that's not my concern. Well, the reality is it actually affects how you lead. Your spiritual health is so serious. Like I said earlier, all of us don't have the same beliefs, and everybody that might watch this or listen to this may not even have the same beliefs that I have. And I'm not trying to tell you to believe what I believe, but I know this to be true. You function and operate with people based on what you value. If you value money over people, it shows up in how you treat them. If you value certain relationships over other relationships, it shows up in your values. If you value certain lifestyles or certain access, it shows up in how you operate in your everyday life. Whatever motivates you tells me how you have or how you will function or how you operate in the world, because that's based on the moral compass that you have. It literally is. It determines how you engage people. It determines how you function in every space that you are in. And that's important for you to understand every single day, that you are living your life, that you are functioning, that you're doing everything based on what you value, based on what you see as important, based on what you believe is essential in how you operate in the world. It's really based on what you specifically value and how your values govern how you treat people. And lastly, as it relates to the spiritual health, is the morality of your leadership will impact your audience. Now, we've talked about how it impacts you personally. We've talked about, how it impacts the people you lead. But if you are a producer of products, if you are a brand, if you are a product producer, if you are a entrepreneur or doing anything else outside of the scope of the people that you have everyday engagement with, they're going to be affected by your decision making. They're going to be affected by the decisions that you make, and they are generally going to tell you if they agree with your decisions. There's a company that we all know that's now owned by Amazon, but its founder and CEO was this guy named John Mackey. And I remember a few years ago, I was watching him share about this concept of conscious capitalism. And I thought it was a very interesting concept. And because I've been very interested lately in the last few years in this idea of social entrepreneurship. And basically, what social entrepreneurship is having a focus, particular in the entrepreneurship space, that is driven by a social cause. Just like with Blake Murkowski with Tom's, his thing was trying to ensure that children have access to shoes. But in this talk that I heard from John Mackey, he said something I thought was really interesting. He said that the economy changes as a result of its presence. And he talks about that conscious capitalism, you have to choose to follow a business strategy in which we seek to benefit both human beings and the environment. He said his whole concept for him founding Whole Foods was trying to create a store that really was about environmental sustainability, quality food, and trying to do things unconventionally in a space that we haven't seen before. And your drive may not be that big, but you have to think about, if people encounter what I'm doing, what would they think and how will it affect them? How would they perceive the thing that I'm sharing or the thing that I want to do in this space? How will they be impacted by my story? How would they be successful because they have engaged or they've come in contact with me, or they have seen some things, or they have experienced a certain thing from me. So now I'm a better person because I've experienced you, or I experienced how you function, or I've experienced how you led organization. And this is the thing. Like I said earlier, no decision is isolated. But there are decisions that I'm making right now that are affecting somebody who's listening to this right now. Me taking the time out to study, to create, to develop this lesson, to do all the things that I've done up until this point is impacting you right now. You don't have to actually listen to my podcast or blog. Thank you for listening to it or watching it on YouTube. I so appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you. I really do. But you don't have to do that. You're not obligated to do that. But just as you are being impacted by what I'm saying and doing right now, I have a responsibility to you. Every time I get in front of this camera, every time I sit down to write, every time I take the time out to create, I have a moral obligation to you to give you my best. I have a moral obligation to you to give you what you deserve as an audience. You deserve excellence from me, even when I'm not feeling excellent. You deserve the best from me, even though I may not even perceive or even maybe in the mood to be even doing what I'm doing. But because I made a commitment and because I realized that I've taken some time to engage myself and center myself in meditation, in prayer, in conversations, in devotion, and all those different things that have helped me be open, I'm able to engage in this topic in a healthy and productive way. For everyone, it won't be the same thing. For some of you, it may be prayer and meditation. For some of you, it may be getting in a car and driving someplace that allows you to clear your head. It allows you to have mindfulness. I know for me personally, it's my belief in God. It's my faith that has helped me get through a lot of things. I know everybody that listens or engages with this content are not people that believe what I believe, but I realize that that's what helps me be healthy. And like I said, like I literally just said, it may be for you going to a park. It may be for you going to the spa. It may be for you doing a variety of things. Find a space and a place where you can become the most effective and the most clear-eyed because you have figured out that you are not the source of your peace or your joy. It's something else that gives you peace or joy. You have to find that. You have to secure that in your mind. You have to secure that in your life, because when you do that, it is freeing for you, and it's going to help you be more effective in the ways that you need to be effective. Because here's the thing, and we'll talk about this more and more as this goes on. Here's the thing. These things matter every single day. What's happening with you personally is not isolated. People that try to compartmentalize their own health internally are dangerous people. That's the most dangerous thing you can do. It's operate as if you are not dealing with something. Operating as if you're not being affected by something. Now, I know everybody's personality is different. But the most powerful thing you can do is actually recognize that you need help in the situation. Now I'm going to take a pause for a second right here, and we'll be right back after these messages. Hi, everybody. Lee here, and I want to give some information to you. Do you need someone to host an event or come and speak at your event? You can now book yours truly. Book me for your event by visiting www.leeascott.com. I am so excited to connect with you and do work with you. Much love, and let's get started. And we are back. Thank you for still being here on Leading with Lee. And like I said earlier, It's so exciting that you are here and that we are talking about this issue today as it relates to us looking at wholeness and our health and how that affects our leadership. But I want to do my second thing that I want to discuss today. And I have a lot of information about this one because I think this one is so, so critical right now for us. Our leaders need to be concerned about their mental health. Mental health, obviously, is a loaded and heavy topic to talk about. And I'm going to give you some stats, and I hope this doesn't trigger people, and I hope it informs you and encourages you, because I'm going to share a little bit of my story and why I think mental health is super important. But I think you have to recognize the importance of this subject of mental health. And I want to give you some stats. According to Medical Health America, which is a great website, it says over 44 million adults have a mental health condition. 44 million have a mental health condition. 1 in 5, or 9 million, have reported having an unmet mental health need. Anxiety disorders are among the most common mental health illness in the US. 40 million adults. These are highly treatable, yet only 36.9% of people get treatment. In other words, a little bit over 1/3 of people actually get treatment, but 40 million folks are dealing with mental health issues. In another study, it says that approximately 1 in 5 Americans experience, 18.5% of Americans experience mental health issues in any given year. It states that 1 in 5 youth ages 13 to 18, that's 21.4%, experience a severe mental health disorder at some point in their lives. And children from 8 to 15, an estimated 13.3%. Now, these stats are pre-pandemic. And that says a lot, because we know, because of the pandemic, this number has probably grown even more. It's probably more individuals in our country, in our society, who are actually dealing with mental health stuff right now because of the crisis that we have all just experienced. I think sometimes we underestimate the impact of a thing because we hadn't had the time to slow down to recognize what it has done to us. And I wonder today, have you considered some of these things? Have you actually had some conversations about how do we address this literal problematic thing that is happening in our society? And I want to give you some points today, but I'm going to talk about a lot of stuff as it relates to this, because this is probably, I got like 6 or 7 points for this. Okay, so bear with me. I want you to stay engaged, stay fully engaged, because this is super important, because I think we got to have some real conversations about what's going on. We can't keep going on and on about people getting back into the workforce or anything like that if we don't actually recognize that people may mentally not be able to deal with the stress of just simply going back into the office. I know listen, I talked about early in the season that there are opportunities for remote work and different things like that. And then there are a lot of businesses that are requiring their folks to come back. And there's a lot of options on the table right now. But the fact of the matter is, at the end of the day, if people are not mentally astute, if they don't have the emotional or psychological capacity to fully be present, it doesn't matter what you say. It doesn't matter what you do in your organization. Their mental health is so important. Here's my first point, because this is a leadership thing that I think is super important as it relates to this. Clear decision making can change the course of the life for our organization or business. Like, you need clear decision making. The clearer your headspace is, the better decisions you'll make. We all have experienced some level of cloudiness in our lives. We all have experienced some moments where we were not really sure about something. We all have experienced some moments where we were like, man, I don't know if this is going to work. I don't know if my engagement in this project is going to be good because I'm not clear-headed about this. And this is serious because so many people are in a moment where they're trying to figure out what is the next move. Even within businesses and organizations, I know that in 2021, we had a lot of growth in certain spaces. In certain spaces, we did not have a lot of growth. In some space, the economy shifted in a lot of ways, like drastically shifted in a lot of ways. But a lot of businesses or a lot of organizations or just people in general are trying to figure out what is the best course of action. Should we downsize? Should we hire more people? Should we spend more money in a certain area? I know it's been happening for me. At the beginning of the year, I was making a lot of decisions as relates to my business or as it relates to what I do. And I'm asking myself, okay, is this going to better my business? Is this going to be the most effective way? And I'm not sure. I'm not completely sure about every decision that I make. But when I start to step back and process them, and when I have a clear mind space, or when I'm a clear headspace, rather, I'm able to make smarter and more effective decisions because I have a clarity of thought. And here's the thing for you. You got to get to a place that you're allowing yourself to get help and get healthy so that you can have clarity of thought. It's a dangerous thing to not be clear about what you're going to do. You hate that in relationships. Have you ever been in a car with a friend, or been in a car with your spouse, or been in a car with your partner, and you're saying, like, where are we going to go for food? You ask them, hey, what do you want to eat? And they say, I don't know. Like, have you ever experienced it? You know how frustrating that is? And then you say, okay, and then you say, okay, you don't know. Okay, what are you feeling? Well, I don't know. What do you want? Well, I don't know. What do you have a taste for? Well, I don't know. And they keep saying, I don't know. And at a certain point, you get frustrated because you're like, I need you to make a decision. That's what's happening when we're talking about the issue of mental health. There are a lot of people that can't make a decision because they don't have clarity of thought right now because there's so much weighing on them. And we could take that even personal. Let's look at a national and global standpoint. Obviously, you saw in the Wholeness episode that I shared about that even this moment of crisis as it relates to Ukraine, and then just different things that's happening around the world. You got to be clear-headed in these moments. Businesses have to be clear-headed in this moment. Governments have to be clear-headed in this moment because any wrong move can cause so much catastrophe to happen around the world. And it's getting harder and harder and harder. And the decisions are getting less and less and less. And you have to be disciplined in your mental space to not be reactionary in moments where literally you could react. Because this thing is serious. This thing is a lot. And it's necessary for leaders and you who are listening, because you are a leader, no matter what you believe about yourself or not, you are a leader, to actually consider, what is the decision that I need to make? What are the things that I need to say yes to? What are the things that I need to engage in? What are the things that I actually need to say no to because I need the time to consider the impact of my decisions? My second point as it relates to this is that a leader response and demeanor can impact every situation. I remember back in 2001, on my 8th birthday, how those Twin Towers were hit. And literally, the world was in peril. And all TV stations, every news station, every person I know eyes were glued to the television, watching what was happening in New York City when the World Trade Centers were hit on my 8th birthday on September 11, 2001. And interestingly enough, the president at the time, George W. Bush, was in Florida. He was at a school reading books to children. And twice, if you see the video, and if I'm not mistaken, twice, one of his aides walked up to him and said, "Hey, something happened at the Twin Towers." In that moment, he had one or two choices. He could have literally just, oh my gosh, like started acting frantic. He could have just lost it. He could have done a whole bunch of things. He literally could have. He could have been like, no, stop what we're doing right now. I'm done reading to these kids. I'm about to go and say something. He literally could have done that. But he chose in that moment to do the latter. He chose to be calm because he recognized that if he was sporadic, if he was all over the place, it would have caused those children to have fear at the moment. And it would have caused a lot of things to happen very quickly if he started operating different. Now, we know later that he came out and gave a speech and he actually gave remarks about the issue. But in the moment, he had to operate a little bit differently. He had to operate as if everything was going to be figured out and everything was going to be okay. Even though we didn't know at the time what was happening. What does that mean for you? That what's going on here affects how you respond to stuff. You have to really figure out how to be a calm, cool, and collected person. And it may be counter to your personality. Oh, it might be. It might be that you are very quick to say what you need to say. Trust me, I have some friends that are very quick to do what they need to do in those moments. But it might be that you have to step back for a second. Could it be that you have to figure out what is the best and the right response in the moment? See, sometimes you need to respond quickly. But sometimes you need to sit back and wait. You may not need to send that tweet. You may need to proofread that tweet before you send it. Before you post that on Instagram or Facebook or before you put that video up, you might want to think about it because there are repercussions to your decisions. There are repercussions to you exposing information. There are repercussions to that. You might need to think that how you respond in that moment, how you move in that moment could have a significant impact on how people view what's going on. That's the challenge that you have. You have to figure out what is the best course of action because there's so many things that you could do in that moment that will make people afraid or whatever. But you have to steward that well. And we know this to be true. We know that leaders can literally, by things that they say, the economies of the world are affected by what leaders say. Our culture is affected by what leaders say. In every space. We are so deeply and profoundly affected by what leaders do every single day. In your city, in your state, at the federal level, not just in government, I'm talking about in entertainment, every space, we are affected by what we do in the world. We are affected by that person's response and their demeanor in every situation. We saw it happen about a year or so ago with this powerful and wonderful woman named Tabitha Brown. There were people that were speaking out against Tabitha Brown. And she responded to the situation with such grace. Do you know how much awareness you have to respond to people that are talking crazy about you with grace? Somebody had dealt with some they had processed some stuff in their lives. They had given some things They had released some things. They had taken some things. They had engaged in some ways so that they knew how to respond with compassion rather than anger. A response like that comes from having lived a life where you have figured out how to deal with this stuff. You see, that comes out of a place of health. And that's what's important for you and I to understand. I know this is not a sexy topic. It's not a fun topic to talk about because it's a lot. We've seen over the years how people have taken their lives due to mental health issues because of the stress that they've experienced, because the things that they're dealing with. But one thing that we have to continuously do, because I think we need to have an action plan. It's not enough to say that, okay, this is the things that, folks are dealing with, but I'm here to give you some action plan, give you an action plan of what we can do collectively together to try to deal with this issue. Number one, as it relates to this action plan, we must continue to destigmatize the issue. Listen, mental health is something we all deal with. It does not matter what your socioeconomic status is. It doesn't matter your race. It doesn't matter your background. Doesn't matter who you are or where you come from. It doesn't matter your sexual orientation. It doesn't matter your gender. It don't even matter. Mental health is something we all deal with. And we all have a different way of coping with it. But we have to deal with this issue. We have to continue to destigmatize and stop pushing that, bro, you got to push through. You got to work through it. No, fam, you need to slow down and stop and figure out how to deal with it. I remember back in 2017, there was a rapper by the name of Logic who, in his performance of this song called Prayers at the 2017 VMA Awards, he literally had people on the stage wearing T-shirts that had the National Suicide Prevention Hotline on it, because he wanted to push the issue that, hey, you don't have to take your life. You don't have to end it. There's more for you. Here's a way you can get help. Here's a way that you can engage the issue. Artists like Khalid has spoken out about the issue. Khalid talked about how we can't deal with this in isolation. Even right now, people like Khalid, even Taraji P. Henson, a great actress, has been pushing mental health awareness in her community. And other people, artists across the board, people have been pushing. We need to get access. We need to engage in conversations about our mental health. We need to do something about the issue. Kid Cudi, who is a phenomenal artist, talked about there's a stigma specifically among Black men about mental health. I think, as a Black man, I have an opinion about it, but I also think that there's a stigma among men in general. Men in general, we for some reason think it's weak to talk about our issues. We think it is weak to have a conversation about what is going on with us, because we think that it's not okay for us to feel broken. And listen, I wasn't intending to do this, but I feel like this is necessary. Whatever man that is listening to this, bro, it's okay. You don't have to be Superman. You don't have to make every decision by yourself. You don't have to sit there and deal with the depravity of your soul. You don't have to deal in the darkness. Bro, I get it. I know there are ladies that are dealing with a lot of mental health issues, but I want to just specifically talk to men real quick. Man, I get it. I know what it's like to be depressed. I know what it's like to feel suicidal. I know what it's like to feel like there's nothing I should be living for. I know what that feels like. There have been seasons in my life where I asked myself, like, did you do enough? Did you what could you have said to save this relationship? What could you have done to save this friendship? What and blaming myself for things that I couldn't control. I was blaming myself for stuff that I had no control of. Sir, I need you to realize and see that you can get help. That it's okay that you feel that way, but it's not okay for you to stay that way. You can get out of it, man. Ma'am, you can get out of it. We're losing way too many people to suicide. We're losing way too many people because they're feeling as if their lives is not good enough. They're feeling as if they cannot accomplish it. And that's what's so dangerous about the time we live in, is that even as young people, I'm 28 years old. And I feel sometimes like because of social media, we get so caught up in what people are doing through social media. We're so affected by what's happening around us that we're not even giving ourselves grace enough to believe that our lives are valuable right now. Not next, not what you do next, right now, right? Literally right now. Right now. Before you make your next big move as far as your career, before you actually get the money, before you do anything else, you matter right now. Your life is valuable right now. Because getting stuff won't fix it. Accomplishing things won't fix it. Doing more won't fix it. Trust me. I'm a busybody and I still don't feel worth sometimes because it has nothing to do with all the stuff that I'm doing. It's the fact that I got to get okay with myself. I really need to move on, but I feel the need to say that we got to continuously have this conversation. And generationally, we're realizing we need to engage in the conversation. Generationally, we are realizing, my goodness, if we don't actually engage in this topic, it's going to kill us. It's going to destroy us. And to Kid Cudi's point, as a Black man in America, and to Kid Cudi's point, as a young Black man in America, I recognize that some of my mental health stressors are connected to my Blackness. I realize that some of my mental health stressors are connected to being in spaces where I have to be very conscious of how I'm engaging or how I'm saying certain things, even though I carry myself a certain way, even though I've had a certain set of experiences that I thank God for, and I'm grateful for the things that I've been able to experience in my life. But I'm seriously understanding that it's not functioning like that for everyone, and I'm so conscious of that. I've been so conscious of the rooms that I've been allowed to be in. I've been so conscious of that. And if I had to ask myself, hey, bro, you got to engage or realize that this cannot just be something that you're thinking is by happenstance. You got to actually believe that you deserve to be here. What use are you if you don't think you even deserve to be here? Because I'm not seeing it all the time. I worked in corporate America. Some of the rooms that I was in and some of the conversations I was in, I weren't seeing a bunch of people that looked like me in there. Now, they might have been advisors, but ultimately making the decision, they don't look like me. They didn't look like me. And obviously that's changing in a lot of ways. Businesses are saying, making a conscious effort to fix that problem. And this is not a criticism. This is just an observation. But I recognize that if I'm in the room, I'm there because I'm supposed to be there. But it is related to my understanding of my mental health. I can't come in there operating as if I don't deserve to be there. And you gotta work on that. You have to actually have conversations about the issue. Because secondly, you got to be willing to go get counseling. Therapy was one of the greatest things that ever happened to me. I realized up until 26 years old, I could go to therapy because I could bill my parents' insurance, and even when I worked in corporate America, I was able to go to therapy from time to time. And obviously, there are businesses that have given you opportunities to go to therapy with this thing called EAP. It's called Employment Assistance Program that allows you to go to therapy. Some companies give you 3 sessions, some companies give you 6 sessions, but use it. Get in counseling, go to therapy. Because I want to give you some stats real quick. Can I give you some stats? Because here's the thing about counseling. And this is prior to the pandemic. In 2019, 19.2% of adults have received any medical health treatment in the past 12 months. 15.8% of those individuals had taken prescription medications for their mental health. 9.5% of them have received counseling or therapy from a mental health professional. Now, obviously, it increased during the pandemic, especially among African Americans, especially among our Latino brothers and sisters, especially among just people in general. Okay? And it's proved my point. It says that women are more likely to receive or go to therapy than men are. We got to break that, man. We got to do something about that. Non-Hispanic white adults, which is 23%, are more likely than non-Hispanic Black, 13.6%, and Hispanics to have received any mental health treatment. Overall, as the level of urbanization decreased, the percentage of adults who had taken medication for their mental health increased, and the percentage of who received counseling or therapy has decreased. We got to get people back into this. And obviously, like I said, this was prior to the pandemic. Obviously, these numbers are probably higher. There probably has been an uptick in the past 2 or 3 years. And even when I had a conversation last year with Dr. Latanya Moore, she actually said that there has been an uptick in people seeking mental health services and seeking people that are like them. People that look like them, people that think like them, people that come from their spaces. People are looking for answers. I want to move on, but I think this is super important. People need help, and people are looking for answers. And you got to be willing and be humble enough to recognize that you need help. It takes a great deal of humility to say, I need help. It takes a great deal of comfort and just wisdom to say, I need help. I can't figure this out. Mentally, I'm going through a lot. I'm having issues processing my success. I'm having issues processing the things that I'm experiencing in my life. I'm having issues. So I'm asking, can I get some help? Can somebody help a brother out? Can somebody help a sister out? Can somebody give me a perspective about what I'm doing that is actually helpful to me? Because this stuff matters. Now, I understand that everybody doesn't have the money or access to go to therapy. And I'll talk about that in a minute because I think it's super important that we have a conversation about it. But one thing you can do, if you got real friendships in your life, one thing you really probably should be doing is taking some time and building relationships that supports individuals through the process of recovery. Let me tell you something. The greatest thing you can do is expose stuff that's going on in your life to your friends, to your family, to people that love you, people that care about you, because it gives them permission to get in that situation with you and care and walk through it with you. You start learning a lot when you let people in. You never know what that conversation will look like if you find out That if you share something, it might open up an opportunity for another individual to be honest and share something with you. When I was in a men's group for about a year and a half, one of the powerful things about that group, even though these guys weren't therapists, these guys were coming from different spaces and times in their lives. Some of these men have been married for years. Some of these men were in different spaces. Some of them were finance guys. Some of these were business owners. Some of these guys were working in the oil and gas industry. I mean, they was working in different spaces. But we all had similarities in our stories, and it allowed us to understand or engage in ways, even though we may not were not the end all be all, we felt seen and understood. We felt seen and heard because we were able to talk about it. We're able to talk about what we were experiencing or dealing with, or the issue that we needed to talk about. You know what your problem is? Some of you are not talking about it. I'm here to encourage you to talk about it. Please talk about it. Please have the courage to let people into the space. Let them in. Let them in. Allow people to have permission to participate in your development and recovery and growth. Give them a chance to be there for you. You don't have to be Superwoman. You don't have to be Superman. I know I said this earlier. You don't have to be the end all be all in every space. Let people in. Because the greatest step you can take is to expose the issue you face. That's the greatest thing you could ever do in your life. It neutralizes its power. It makes it smaller. Because a lot of things that are secret are potent. But you got to take your power back. Secrecy is a dangerous thing, especially when it comes to your mental health, because if you don't expose it, it can't be dealt with. A friend of mine said something that really got me. We're having a conversation, and she said, one of the things that people have to realize when you come into a room, if the lights are off, if you run into a chair, you're running into things, it's because you can't see them. And that's the power of light. Exposure, light. Light exposes stuff. Right now, the reason why you can see me is because there's a light on. There's a light on. There's light in this room. If I literally turned the light off, you could not see me because there's no light. We need light in these spaces so that we can get help. Light invites people into the spaces that you need them in. Exposure does that. And I know exposure can literally be embarrassing. There's some things that I've done in my life. There's some things I've experienced in my life that I am not proud of. But because I expose them, to people that love me, that have relationship with me, I was able to get healing and wholeness. I may not have been totally be able to get over it, but I was able to get on the road to recovery. I was able to move forward because I exposed it. And here is my last point, because I think that this is so important. And this is probably the most important point. After all of what I said, how we personally in our own lives need to figure out how do we develop our leadership spiritually, addressing the mental health crisis that we have in our culture. We got to talk about how does it get beyond just us getting what we need. We need to work collectively. I believe collectively we can work together to ensure that people get access in the way that they need. And I have some ideas about it. And I know this is not a policy podcast, but it's leadership. It's a leadership conversation. Obviously, there are grants and money out there that people probably should find out about. Maybe you could send me some information, and maybe I could do another episode and talk about this again and give you some ways that you can get involved. But I want to talk about this last point, is that we need to create greater access to mental health care. I'm going to say it again. Some of the reason why people won't go to therapy is because it costs too much. And that's not the fault of therapists. That's not the fault of the people in the mental health space. That's not their fault. Okay. It's because we are not doing enough. And I could be wrong, but there's not enough intentionality within organizations to let their folks know that they have access to mental health care. Because it's so taboo. Because it makes people feel bad that we have to talk about needing mental health care. Because the first thing we got to do is extend efforts to tell people that they have access to it. Because your mental health affects everything. It affects everything. It affects your quality of life. What's happening right here? I said on a recent episode that leadership is a mindset. Let me tell you something. Pretty much everything that happens in your life starts here. It starts right there. I'm telling you right now, the reason why some people's lives are not changing is because their mindsets haven't changed. But we also have to understand a part of that personal responsibility is giving them access. Because without access, you can't be exposed to something that's different. You only do what you know. Let's be very clear about it. We always talk about telling people I'm talking really fast. Forgive me, y'all. But I'm fired up about this because we always tell people to have personal responsibility, which I agree with. But you cannot have personal responsibility without access. Because if you've never seen something different, you can't believe that it can be different. You're only going to operate at the level of your exposure. This is why we have so many things going on with our homeless and impoverished populations in our country and our culture. Because many of them have not been given the access that they need to mental health care. And I could be wrong. There's cities and states across the country that are making efforts to specifically fulfill the need to take care of these communities. They're doing everything in their power. And I applaud them for that. That's fantastic. But needless to say, there is still overwhelmingly a large contingent of folks in our society who are not getting what they need as it relates to this issue. They're not. And we got to educate folks about what they have access to. I'm going to share this really quickly and get you out of here. But I realized this even in my own life. I got an opportunity to work at a mental health, a behavioral health hospital in the last few months that I've been back in Mississippi. And it's been so interesting to recognize no matter where these people come from, who they are, what are their connections, what they do, they all need access. And I often ask myself, what if I had access at their age? What if I had access sooner? What if I knew I had access sooner? What if I had language around the conversation sooner? Where would I be emotionally? Where would I be mentally? Would I be more self-aware? Would I have more emotional intelligence, which I'll talk about on the next episode? Would I have more of that because I did the hard work of digging deep and recognizing that I needed help? Because you also have to teach people that if you have access, you cannot squander that access. You have to recognize that the access is so precious and critical. And here's my last thing, and I'm going to get you out of here. Because there was something else I want to talk about, but I think that's the whole episode. Because I'm really passionate about this particular issue. So the last suggestion I have is we got to bring it back to schools. We got to work as hard as we can to get counselors back in schools. We got to bring nurses back in school systems. Because every kid that won't have the opportunity to go to a therapist. Every child may not have the opportunity or the funds or the access We realize, we know this to be true. The kids over the last 2 or 3 years, throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, there are children who are sitting at home, wanted to go to school, needed to go to school, and obviously couldn't go to school because of the nature of the situation, but they didn't have Wi-Fi to get on and go to class. You know how that affected their mental health? They didn't have access to computers and things like that to be able to do the things they need to do as far as their educational advancement. We are seeing statistically the disparities between children who were in spaces where they had access and they didn't. And it's all over the spectrum. It's affecting everyone. And this is why this is important. We got to have some language around this. We got to actually start having conversations about how can we be more effective in this conversation about mental health. And I'm going to say this as a person of faith. My spiritual and mental health are equally as important. One is not more important than the other. They often affect each other. The way I think affects my soul. The way I perceive the world affects how I'm operating in my soul. So why not try to take care of both? My encouragement to you today is to do some self-work. I hope you come back for the next episode because I'm super excited to talk more about this idea of health and actually getting us to understand that it's so much more complicated, it's so much more dynamic than we really think about. It's necessary that we have this conversation. I'm excited to see you next time. Okay? Much love, and let's get started. And I hope that you were inspired to take care and make some steps as it relates to your spiritual and mental health. See you next time, guys. Thank you for watching and or listening to this week's episode of Leading with Lee. If you have not done it yet, subscribe on YouTube and all podcasting platforms. If you want to get more information and connect with me, visit me at www.leeascott.com or follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Lee A. Scott II or Lee A. Scott II. So thank you for watching. Much love, and let's get started.